The rain started 5 minutes after I missed my train. Not light rain either. The kind that hits the pavement so hard it bounces back up in misty waves, turning the entire city gray in seconds. One moment the platform had been crowded and loud, people rushing home after work. The next, everyone scattered for cover like the sky had personally offended them. I stood under the tiny station awning, backpack hanging off one shoulder, watching water pour over the tracks in sheets. Perfect, I muttered. My phone buzzed with a weather alert that would have been useful an hour earlier. Severe thunderstorm warning. Thanks. A cold gust of wind blew rain sideways onto my jeans. I stepped back farther under the awning and checked the train schedule again, even though I already knew the answer. Delayed. Indefinitely. Of course. There were maybe 10 of us left stranded at the station now. Most people had either called rides or sprinted into the storm. I considered ordering an Uber, but surge pricing was already insane. That's when someone beside me said, "You look like you're about 2 seconds away from declaring war on the weather." I glanced over. Tall guy. Dark hoodie soaked at the shoulders. Brown hair damp from the rain. He leaned casually against the wall like being trapped in a storm was somehow entertaining to him. I recognized him instantly. Cole. Not friend-level recognition. More like familiar stranger recognition. We'd seen each other around campus for almost a year. Same business department. Same coffee shop near the library. Same Tuesday night economics lecture where he always showed up late and somehow still answered every question correctly. We never actually talked before. "You're laughing," I said. "Which means this isn't happening to you." "Oh, it definitely is," he replied. "My car's parked 6 blocks away." "That bad?" "Honestly? I'm considering just building a raft." I snorted despite myself. He smiled a little at that, subtle but smug, like he considered making strangers laugh a personal achievement. A loud crack of thunder shook the station. Someone cursed nearby. Cole glanced toward the tracks. "Looks like we're stuck." "Looks like it." For a minute we just stood there listening to the rain hammer against metal and concrete. It was weirdly loud, drowning out the city itself. Then he held out a hand. "Cole." I looked at it for half a second before shaking it. "Ethan." "I know." That caught me off guard. "You know my name? You sit 3 rows behind me in econ." He shrugged. "You sigh aggressively every time Professor Bennett mentions group projects." I stared at him. "You noticed that?" "You're hard not to notice." The second he said it, something shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough that I suddenly became hyper-aware of how close we were standing beneath the awning. Rain sprayed sideways again, forcing both of us farther inward until our shoulders nearly brushed. "This storm's insane," I said, mostly because silence suddenly felt dangerous. Cole looked out at the flooded street. "Yeah. Think the universe is trying to cancel Tuesday. Honestly, I'd support that." Another rumble of thunder rolled overhead. Then the station lights flickered. Everyone collectively groaned. "No way," I said. The lights died completely for 2 seconds before emergency power kicked in, dim and yellow. Cole laughed under his breath. "Okay, now it feels like we're in a disaster movie. If zombies show up, I'm pushing you toward them first." "Wow. After I offered emotional support? You offered weather commentary. Which is emotionally valuable." I smiled before I could stop myself. He noticed. That much was obvious. His expression changed slightly after that. Softer somehow. More focused. "So," he said, leaning back against the wall again. "You live nearby?" "About 20 minutes away. Usually." "Walking?" "Train, then bus." I looked at the storm. "Not happening tonight, apparently." "Same direction as downtown?" "Yeah." He nodded slowly, thinking. "My apartment's closer," he said after a second. "Like 10 minutes from here." I blinked. "Okay. You can wait out the storm there if you want." Straight to the point. No awkwardness. No weird tone. Just simple. Still, I hesitated. Not because it sounded dangerous. Because it sounded strangely easy. He noticed the hesitation immediately. You don't have to, he added. I just figured standing in a dying train station for 3 hours might be worse. That depends, I said. Do you murder people often? Only on weekdays. Good. Weekends are important to me. That earned another laugh. God, his laugh was unfairly attractive. I realized then that I'd never actually looked at him properly before. Not really. Cole had one of those faces that got more interesting the longer you stared at it. Sharp jawline. Tired eyes that somehow still looked warm. The kind of expression that always felt halfway between amused and thoughtful. You're still deciding if I'm a serial killer, he said. I'm deciding if your apartment secretly has no furniture. That's fair. Another burst of rain slammed across the station sideways hard enough to soak our shoes. Cole looked down at the flooding platform, then back at me. Come on, he said. Worst case scenario, we die of awkward small talk. I laughed again. And that was probably the moment I made the mistake. Or maybe the best decision I'd made in months. Because 5 minutes later, I was running through the rain beside a guy I barely knew, both of us soaked instantly, laughing every time thunder cracked overhead. And neither of us realized yet that we were about to get stuck together for a lot longer than one storm. By the time we reached Cole's apartment building, I was drenched down to my socks. Remind me why we ran? I asked between breaths as we pushed through the lobby doors. Character development, Cole replied immediately. I laughed, water dripping from my hair onto the tile floor. The lobby lights flickered once from the storm outside. Somewhere above us, thunder rattled the windows again. Your city's trying to kill us, I muttered. Nah, he said, pressing the elevator button. It's just dramatic. The elevator never came. After 30 seconds, Cole sighed. Power's probably messed up. Please tell me you live on the 2nd floor. He looked at me sympathetically. 5th. You're dead to me. Cardio builds trust. Pretty sure that's not how trust works. It is during natural disasters. The stairwell smelled faintly like wet concrete. We climbed in silence for the first 2 floors, both too busy catching our breath to talk much. By the 3rd floor, Cole glanced back at me. You okay? No, I said flatly. I'm mourning the person I used to be before these stairs. He grinned. I noticed then how easy it already felt talking to him. Which was strange. Normally I hated situations like this. Being stuck with someone I didn't know well usually made me hyper-aware of every silence, every awkward pause. But with Cole, conversations slid naturally into place like we'd skipped some invisible beginning stage. By the time we reached the 5th floor, my hoodie was sticking to my skin and my lungs were filing complaints against me. Cole unlocked apartment 5C and pushed the door open. Welcome to luxury. The apartment was small but warm in that lived-in way that immediately made me relax. Dim yellow lamps. Books stacked unevenly on a shelf. A couch that looked actually comfortable instead of decorative. The faint smell of coffee still lingering somewhere. It has furniture, I said approvingly. Told you. And electricity. Huge bonus. Debatable. The Wi-Fi's emotionally unstable. I stepped inside while he disappeared briefly into another room. Rain hammered against the windows behind us. The storm somehow sounded even louder up here. Cole returned carrying 2 towels and tossed one at me. You look hypothermic. I feel expensive, I corrected, drying my hair. Yeah, soaking wet really screams luxury lifestyle. I smiled into the towel before he could see it. He disappeared again and came back wearing gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt now instead of the soaked hoodie. Which honestly felt unfair. Because somehow he looked even better relaxed. I quickly looked away before my brain started embarrassing me. You can hang your stuff over there, he said, pointing toward a chair near the radiator. It'll dry eventually. Probably. Optimistic. I try. I peeled off my wet hoodie, leaving just my t-shirt underneath, and hung it carefully over the chair. My phone buzzed with another emergency weather notification. Flash flood warning. Seek shelter immediately. Well, I said. Guess I live here now. Cole glanced at the notification and whistled softly. Yeah, you're definitely not getting home tonight. Something about hearing him say tonight made the room suddenly feel smaller. Not bad small. Just aware small. Like we'd crossed into a different kind of situation now. You hungry? He asked casually. A little. I have frozen pizza and low standards. That's honestly all I need in life. Good. We're compatible already. The word compatible landed weirdly in my chest. He probably didn't mean anything by it. Still. While he started the oven, I wandered slightly around the apartment pretending not to notice how personal everything suddenly felt. Framed photos. A guitar leaning against the wall. Messy notes scattered across the kitchen counter. Pieces of someone's life always reveal more than conversations do. You play? I asked, nodding toward the guitar. Cole glanced over. Badly. So yes. So technically yes. You seem like someone who learned one sad song and made it everybody's problem. He pointed at me immediately. That is incredibly accurate. I can tell. How? You have the energy. He laughed under his breath while pulling plates from a cabinet. Again that warmth. It kept sneaking up on me. Outside, thunder cracked so loudly the windows rattled. The lights flickered once more. Cole looked toward the ceiling. If the power dies completely, I'm blaming you. I brought personality to this apartment. You brought biblical weather. Coincidence. Suspicious coincidence. The pizza went into the oven. Then came the weirdest part. Comfortable silence. Not forced silence. Not searching for something to say silence. Just easy. Cole leaned against the kitchen counter scrolling through his phone while I sat at the edge of the couch listening to the storm outside. It should have felt awkward. Instead it felt strangely calm. You always this quiet? He asked eventually. Only when I'm plotting. That's reassuring. I contain mysteries. You sigh aggressively in economics lectures, he reminded me. Your secrets aren't that deep. I groaned. You really noticed that? You're expressive. Is that a nice way of saying dramatic? A little. I threw the towel at him. He caught it one-handed without looking. Okay. That was annoying. You practiced that, I accused. Natural talent. Hate that for me. He smiled again, that smaller version this time, softer around the edges. Then his phone buzzed. The expression on his face shifted slightly when he checked it. Not bad exactly. Just distant for a second. You good? I asked before thinking. Yeah, he said quickly, locking the screen. Just my roommate asking if the building's flooded yet. You have a roommate? Technically. He's staying with his girlfriend this week. Oh. I hated how relieved I felt. Like genuinely hated it. Cole noticed the reaction anyway. I could tell by the tiny glance he gave me before turning back toward the oven. Dangerous. This whole thing suddenly felt dangerous. Not because of him. Because I was already paying too much attention. The rain kept pounding against the windows. Neither of us suggested checking train updates anymore. The power went out 20 minutes later. Completely this time. 1 second the apartment glowed warm yellow from the lamps. The next, everything dropped into darkness while thunder cracked overhead hard enough to shake the windows. Jesus, I flinched automatically. Cole laughed somewhere nearby. Okay, that one was personal. You said your apartment had electricity. It did. Briefly. I heard drawers opening in the kitchen. Then the soft click of a flashlight. Cole appeared a second later holding it under his chin dramatically. Welcome to the haunted version of my apartment. You look like you're about to tell me the ghost of a Victorian child lives here. She does. Her name's Rebecca and she hates men. Valid. He grinned and tossed me another flashlight from the kitchen drawer. Rain slammed against the windows harder than ever now. Without the background hum of electricity, The storm sounded enormous. Like the whole building was sitting inside it instead of beside it. That's kind of intense, I admitted quietly. Cole glanced toward the window. Yeah. Another crack of thunder. Closer this time. The apartment briefly flashed white from lightning outside. Then darkness again. I suddenly became aware of how isolated everything felt. 5th floor. No elevator. Storm shutting down half the city. And somehow, just the two of us. You scared of storms? Cole asked. No. I paused. Maybe a little. He looked weirdly pleased by the honesty. That's cute. Don't call me cute during a weather emergency. You admitted vulnerability. That's legally adorable. I pointed the flashlight directly at his face. You're annoying. And yet you followed me home. That shut me up for exactly 2 seconds too long. Cole noticed immediately. The smugness on his face became unbearable. Oh, he said softly. Interesting. I regret everything. Too late now. The oven beeped from the kitchen despite the power outage. Then immediately died again. We both stared at it. Did your oven survive longer than the lights? I asked. I respect its commitment. Thankfully, the pizza had finished cooking right before the outage. Cole carried it carefully to the coffee table while I lit 2 candles he found in a cabinet. The apartment shifted instantly in candlelight. Softer. Closer. Dangerously close. You know, Cole said while sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the table. This feels weirdly romantic for 2 guys stranded during a flood warning. I nearly choked on pizza. He laughed immediately. Relax. I'm kidding. Sure you are. I am. A beat passed. Mostly. I looked up too fast. Cole held my gaze for half a second longer than normal before taking another bite casually like he hadn't just dropped a grenade into the conversation. My heartbeat suddenly felt very loud. You flirt with everybody during natural disasters? I asked carefully. Only the dramatic ones. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. God. The problem with Cole was that he said things lightly enough to escape responsibility for them but not lightly enough to ignore. Outside, wind rattled against the building again. I pulled my knees closer instinctively. Cole noticed. You cold? A little. Without saying anything else, he stood up and disappeared down the hallway. He returned carrying a dark green hoodie. Here. I stared at it. What if it smells like you and ruins my emotional stability? He blinked once. Then laughed so hard he nearly dropped the flashlight. Oh my God! He said through laughter. You're secretly insane. You brought me into your home willingly. That's on you. Still smiling, he tossed the hoodie toward me. I pulled it on mostly for warmth. Immediately a mistake. Because yes, it smelled like him. Laundry detergent. Coffee. Something warmer underneath that instantly made my brain unhelpful. Cole watched my expression carefully from across the couch. That bad? You're impossible to psychologically recover from. That sounds serious. It is. His smile faded slightly after that. Not gone. Just quieter. The storm outside softened for a moment into steady rain instead of violent thunder. In the calmer silence, the apartment suddenly felt incredibly small again. Cole leaned back against the couch cushions beside me now instead of staying on the floor. Closer than before. Not touching. But close enough that I noticed the heat from his shoulder. So, he said after a minute, voice lower now. Can I ask you something? That depends how emotionally damaging it is. I'll try to keep it moderate. I looked over at him. Candlelight made everything softer around the edges. His face. His expression. The entire moment honestly. He studied me for a second before asking quietly. Have you really never noticed me before? The question caught me completely off guard. What? In class? He clarified. Coffee shop. Around campus. I noticed you. I admitted carefully. How much? Too much suddenly. Way too much. I looked down at the pizza box mostly to avoid his eyes. You always looked. I stopped. Cole waited. Confident, I finished finally. Like you belonged wherever you were. Something shifted in his expression again. That's funny, he said softly. Why? Because I've been thinking the same thing about you for months. My chest tightened instantly. Neither of us moved. The storm rolled quietly outside now, distant thunder humming through the city while candlelight flickered across the apartment walls. Cole looked at me steadily. No joking now. No teasing. Just real. I always wanted an excuse to talk to you, he admitted. I swallowed hard. And now? His eyes flicked briefly toward the rain-soaked windows. I guess the universe got tired of waiting. I don't think either of us knew what to do after that. That was the strange thing. Usually moments like this feel obvious in movies. Someone says something meaningful, music swells, everybody suddenly becomes emotionally fearless. Real life was quieter. Messier. Cole was still sitting beside me on the couch, candlelight flickering across his face while rain tapped steadily against the windows now instead of crashing. Neither of us looked away. I feel like the storm's manipulating us, I said finally, because my brain refused to survive sincerity for too long. Cole smiled softly. Yeah? Yeah. Very suspicious timing. You think the weather ships us? Unfortunately. That earned a quiet laugh. But the tension stayed. Not awkward tension. The dangerous kind. The kind where every small movement suddenly matters too much. Cole leaned his head back against the couch cushion, still watching me carefully. You know what's weird? He asked. What? I thought you hated me for like 3 months. I stared at him. What? You always looked annoyed in class. That's just my face. That's devastating news. I'm serious. He shook his head slowly, smiling. No chance. Every time I walked in late, you'd look at me like I personally ruined your week. To be fair, you always interrupted lectures dramatically. Confidence, he corrected. Narcissism. Harsh. I smiled despite myself. Cole looked at me for a second too long after that. Then quieter. I noticed when you stopped sitting near the window. The comment surprised me. What? In econ. He shrugged slightly. You used to sit by the window every lecture. Then one day somebody else took your spot and you never moved back. I blinked at him. That's weirdly specific. He looked suddenly embarrassed for the first time all night. Yeah, well. He rubbed the back of his neck lightly. I noticed things. Something warm twisted painfully in my chest. Because people don't notice things like that accidentally. Outside, thunder rumbled farther away now. The storm was slowly drifting across the city instead of sitting directly over us. Neither of us mentioned it. I think we both knew the weather had stopped being the actual problem a while ago. Cole shifted slightly beside me, one arm stretched along the back of the couch now. Still not touching. Which somehow felt more intense than if he had. Can I admit something embarrassing? He asked. Always. I almost talked to you like 5 different times before tonight. I smiled immediately. Seriously? Twice at the coffee shop. When? You dropped your pen once. That was your opening plan. I panicked. I laughed. Cole pointed at me defensively. You looked intimidating. I absolutely do not look intimidating. You sigh at authority figures constantly. That's called personality. That's called unresolved issues. Wow. He grinned. God, he really was unfair to look at when he smiled like that. The apartment had gotten warmer somehow despite the storm outside. Or maybe it was just the hoodie. Or the fact that Cole's knee was now barely brushing mine every time either of us moved. Neither of us corrected it. I have another confession, he said quietly after a moment. Should I prepare emotionally? Probably. I pulled my legs closer slightly toward him without thinking. Cole noticed that too. I could tell. His voice dropped lower when he continued. When you agreed to come here tonight, he admitted. I got nervous. That surprised me enough that I actually laughed softly. You? Nervous? Yeah. You seemed completely confident. I was performing. The honesty in that hit harder than flirting would have. I looked at him differently after that. Because suddenly I could see it. The small signs underneath the jokes. The way he watched my reactions carefully. The tiny pauses before saying certain things. Cole wasn't smooth because he was fearless. He was smooth because he was nervous. And somehow that made him even more attractive. That's kind of adorable, I admitted before thinking. He groaned immediately. Absolutely not. You don't get to use my own tactics against me. Feels good, doesn't it? No. I feel vulnerable. You should. Cole looked at me then with this expression I couldn't fully read anymore. Something softer than teasing. More careful. Ethan, he said quietly. The way he said my name made the room tilt slightly. Yeah? Another pause. Then, I really can't tell if you're flirting with me right now. I stared at him for half a second. You invited me to your apartment during a thunderstorm. You came. You gave me your hoodie. You put emotional significance on the hoodie. You noticed where I sit in class. That's observational talent. I leaned slightly closer before I could overthink it. That's gay, Cole. He laughed immediately, full real laughter this time, head falling back against the couch. You're unbelievable. You started it. I absolutely did. The laughter faded slowly after that, leaving us too close again. Too aware. Cole's eyes flicked briefly toward my mouth and then back up so quickly I almost thought I imagined it. But I didn't. Because my pulse reacted instantly. The room went very quiet. Outside, rain continued softly against the glass. Inside, it suddenly felt hard to breathe normally. Cole looked at me carefully now. Like he was deciding something. Can I be honest again? He asked softly. That depends if you're about to psychologically ruin me. No promises. I swallowed. He hesitated only a second before speaking. When we were running through the rain earlier. His eyes stayed locked on mine. I couldn't stop thinking about kissing you. Every thought in my brain immediately dissolved. Completely. Gone. Cole must have seen the exact moment my breathing changed because his expression shifted to less teasing now. More uncertain. You don't have to say anything, he added quickly. I just. No, I interrupted quietly. He stopped. And somehow the silence after that felt even louder than the storm had been. I looked at him steadily, heart pounding so hard it almost hurt. Then admitted the truth. I was thinking about it too. Neither of us moved after that. Which honestly felt impossible considering how hard my heart was beating. Cole sat completely still beside me, eyes fixed on mine like he was trying to figure out whether this was real or whether the storm had finally caused collective hallucinations. You were? He asked quietly. I nodded once. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not smug this time. Almost relieved. That's good, he admitted. Good? Yeah. He exhaled softly through a nervous laugh. Because I've been trying very hard not to completely embarrass myself for the last 2 hours. You've failed several times already. Cruel. You survived. Barely. God. Everything about this felt dangerous now. Not because something bad was happening. Because something good was. And those are always the moments that scare me more. Cole shifted slightly toward me again, slow enough that I could have moved away if I wanted to. I didn't. The candlelight between us flickered softly across the room. Outside, rain rolled steadily over the windows while the city stayed dark beneath the storm. It felt weirdly disconnected from reality. Like we existed somewhere separate from normal life for a little while. Cole looked down briefly before speaking again. I should probably tell you something before this goes any farther. My stomach tightened immediately. That sounds terrifying. It's not bad. He smiled faintly. Just honest. I waited. He rubbed his thumb lightly against the edge of the couch cushion like he was grounding himself. I'm not. He paused carefully. I'm not great at this. At what? This. He gestured vaguely between us. Liking somebody. The honesty in his voice hit me hard enough that I forgot to breathe for a second. You say that like it's a skill. It kind of is. You seem pretty natural so far. Cole laughed softly under his breath. Trust me. Internally, this has been catastrophic. That made me smile immediately. But there was still something serious underneath it. You've dated people before, though, right? I asked carefully. A couple. He nodded once. Nothing serious. And guys? His eyes flicked back up to mine. Only one, he admitted quietly. Something about the vulnerability in that answer softened everything inside me instantly. Not because of the answer itself. Because he trusted me enough to say it. Cole watched my expression carefully after admitting it, like he expected me to react differently somehow. When I didn't, his shoulders relaxed slightly. You? He asked after a moment. I looked down briefly at my hands. Yeah, I admitted. A few. How'd that go? I laughed once quietly. You really want the emotionally damaging version or the funny version? Funny first. One guy broke up with me because I apparently used too many big words during arguments. Cole blinked. That's genuinely insane. Thank you. What words? I don't even remember. Probably something annoying. You absolutely seem like somebody who says fundamentally during fights. That is a very reasonable word. Cole grinned. See? There it is. I shoved his shoulder lightly. He looked down at where my hand touched him for half a second too long. Then back at me. And suddenly the room felt warm again. Neither of us pulled away this time. Cole's voice dropped quieter. What about the real answer? The question settled heavier between us. I looked away briefly toward the rain-covered windows. I think, I said slowly, I got used to being around people who made me feel difficult. His expression changed immediately. Difficult? Like I was too much sometimes. I shrugged lightly. Too emotional. Too intense. Whatever. Cole stared at me like I just said something personally offensive. That's stupid. I looked back at him. He shook his head once, firmer now. No, seriously, Ethan. You don't come across difficult at all. I laughed softly. You've known me for like 4 hours. And? His eyes stayed on mine. I still know that's wrong. Something about the certainty in his voice hit deeper than it should have. Because he said it so simply. Like it was obvious. The room went quiet again. But softer now. Closer. Cole's hand rested near mine on the couch cushion between us. Not touching yet. Just there. Waiting. You know what's weird? He said quietly after a minute. What? This whole night feels familiar somehow. I smiled faintly. That's concerning. No, I mean... He searched for the words. Usually when I meet someone new, I feel like I'm performing a version of myself they'll like better. I understood that immediately. Too immediately. But with you, he continued softly, I kind of forgot to do that. The air in my lungs disappeared. Completely. Because nobody had ever described that feeling out loud before. That exact feeling. I looked at him carefully now. Not the confident version from class. Not the teasing version from earlier. Just Cole. Real. Nervous. Open. And somehow that felt more intimate than anything else tonight. You make me feel calm, I admitted before thinking. The second the words left my mouth, Cole's expression softened in a way that almost hurt to look at. Neither of us spoke after that. We didn't need to. The distance between us already felt paper-thin now. Cole moved first this time. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was giving me every possible chance to stop him. His hand brushed lightly against mine. Then stayed there. I looked down automatically at our fingers resting together on the couch cushion. Such a small thing. But somehow it changed the entire room. Cole watched me quietly. Still okay? I nodded once. Yeah, I said softly. Still okay. And when he smiled after that, it wasn't teasing anymore. It looked almost relieved. I don't know who leaned in first. Later, I tried to replay it exactly to figure out the moment the distance between us disappeared, but everything after that felt blurred around the edges in the best way. 1 second we were sitting there in candlelight, hands barely touching. The next, Cole was close enough that I could feel his breathing. And suddenly neither of us were joking anymore. Ethan, he said softly. The way he said my name should have been illegal, honestly. Yeah? I answered quietly. His eyes searched mine carefully. Nervously. I really want to kiss you. Every thought in my brain vanished again. I smiled before I could stop myself. You keep announcing things right before doing them. I'm trying to be respectful. It's kind of ruining your mysterious reputation. Cole laughed softly under his breath. Then he kissed me. Gentle at first. Careful enough that I felt the hesitation underneath it, not uncertainty exactly, just the awareness that this mattered. And God. I'd been attracted to him all night already. That wasn't the surprise. The surprise was how natural it felt. Like something settling into place instead of changing. Cole pulled back slightly after a second, forehead resting lightly against mine while both of us tried unsuccessfully to breathe normally. Okay, he murmured. I laughed quietly. That sounded emotionally overwhelming. You have no idea. I could still feel his smile when he leaned in again. This kiss felt different. Less careful. Still soft but real now. My hand found the front of his hoodie instinctively, fingers curling lightly against the fabric just to ground myself somehow. Cole made this tiny surprised sound against my mouth that completely destroyed whatever composure I had left. When we finally pulled apart again, both of us looked slightly stunned. Well? I said weakly. Yeah, Cole replied immediately. That seems medically significant. He laughed quietly, rubbing one hand over his face. I was trying so hard to act normal tonight. You invited me home during a thunderstorm. I know. Horrible strategy. Very suspicious behavior. I blame your face. That's not a real excuse. It is to me. I smiled helplessly. The candlelight flickered lower around us while rain continued softly outside. The storm had mostly passed now, but neither of us acknowledged it. Because leaving suddenly felt impossible to think about. Cole leaned back slightly into the couch cushions, still close enough that our knees stayed pressed together naturally now. You know what's embarrassing? He admitted. What? I genuinely thought you were out of my league. I stared at him in disbelief. Cole. I'm serious. That's insane. Thank you, I've been waiting for validation. I laughed, but my chest hurt a little too. Because I understood the feeling. Way too well. You look so confident all the time, I admitted quietly. That's because I was panicking professionally. That explains the constant sarcasm. Defense mechanism. Effective one. Cole smiled at that, softer now. There was something different about him after the kiss. Not changed exactly. Just more open. Like some invisible wall had quietly disappeared between us. You want to know something else? He asked. Depends how emotionally dangerous it is. When the power went out earlier, he said, part of me got happy about it. I raised an eyebrow immediately. You thrive in chaos? No. His eyes stayed on mine. I liked having an excuse to keep you here. My heartbeat stuttered hard enough that I physically looked away for a second. Cole noticed. You do that every time I say something real, he said softly. What? Look away. I glanced back at him immediately, embarrassed. No, I don't. You absolutely do. That's slander. It's observation. Stop observing me. Can't. The way he said it, quiet and automatic, hit me straight in the chest. Neither of us spoke after that. The silence wrapped around us comfortably now, warm and close and filled with things we both suddenly understood without saying out loud. Then Cole ruined it slightly by sighing dramatically. What? I asked. He looked genuinely conflicted now. I'm trying very hard to act cool about this. And? I fear I'm failing. I laughed immediately. Cole pointed at me accusingly. See? That. You're being weirdly adorable. That's exactly the problem. I smiled into the sleeve of his hoodie. The apartment felt impossibly calm now compared to the storm earlier. Just candlelight, soft rain outside, and Cole sitting beside me looking at me like he still couldn't fully believe this was happening either. Then his phone buzzed suddenly on the coffee table. Both of us glanced down automatically. A weather notification lit the screen. Severe flooding across downtown. Public transit suspended until morning. Cole looked at the message. Then at me. Well, he said softly. Guess you're officially trapped here. Something warm and nervous twisted low in my chest. Tragic, I murmured. Yeah, he replied, smiling slightly. Really tragic. I should have gone to sleep. That became very obvious around 2 in the morning when Cole and I were still sitting on the couch talking like we'd known each other longer than a single stormy night. The candles had burned low by then. Rain still tapped softly against the windows, but the city outside looked calmer now, dark streets glistening under distant traffic lights. Inside the apartment, everything felt strangely suspended. You know what I just realized? Cole said quietly. What? I have class with you tomorrow. I groaned immediately. Oh no. He laughed. Exactly. Imagine pretending this didn't happen while Professor Bennett talks about market structures. I'll have to transfer universities. That feels dramatic. I am dramatic. You established that already. True. His shoulder brushed mine lightly when he shifted closer on the couch again. Neither of us moved away anymore. That part had become natural surprisingly fast. Dangerously fast. Cole tilted his head slightly while studying me. You look tired. I am tired. Then why are you still awake? I opened my mouth automatically. Then stopped. Because the real answer felt too obvious suddenly. I don't want this night to end. Judging by the look on Cole's face, he understood anyway. Yeah, he said softly. Just that. Like he'd heard the answer without me saying it. The room went quiet again. Not empty quiet. Full quiet. I looked over at him carefully. Can I ask you something? Always. Why didn't you talk to me before tonight? Cole smiled faintly to himself before answering. Honestly? He rubbed his thumb lightly against the couch seam. You seemed happy alone. That caught me off guard. What? You always look self-contained, he explained quietly. Like you had your own world going on. I stared at him for a second. That's so weird, I admitted. Why? Because I was thinking the exact opposite about you. Cole blinked once, surprised. You looked. I searched for the word carefully. Untouchable. He laughed softly at that. Ethan, I sprinted through a flood to impress you. Fair point. And I nearly died on the stairs. That was very brave. It was cardio-based suffering. I smiled helplessly. God, this felt dangerous now in a completely different way. Not temporary dangerous. Real dangerous. Because somewhere between the train station and now, I'd stopped thinking about Cole as a stranger. And I had no idea when exactly that happened. Maybe during the stairs. Maybe during the candlelight conversation. Maybe the moment he admitted he noticed where I sat in class. Or maybe it happened the second he looked at me like I mattered before he even really knew me. You're doing the thinking thing again, Cole murmured. The what? The staring into space like your brain's fighting itself. I laughed softly. You notice too much. Told you already? The apartment fell quiet again. Then Cole suddenly stood up. Wait here. That sounds threatening. I'm being hospitable. He disappeared briefly into a hallway before returning with another blanket. Your reward for surviving the storm, he said, tossing it toward me. You're surprisingly caring for someone who accused me of bringing biblical weather into his apartment. You suffered bravely. I did. Cole sat back down beside me, closer this time automatically, one arm stretched comfortably along the back of the couch behind me. Not performative. Not hesitant. Just easy. The blanket settled across both of us naturally after a minute without either of us acknowledging it. Outside, rain continued softly against the windows. Inside, the room felt warm enough now that I could barely remember being cold earlier. Cole looked down at me slightly from where his arm rested behind my shoulders. "You know," he said quietly, "this is probably the weirdest way I've ever liked somebody." I smiled immediately. "The flood? The entire sequence of events? You mean stalking me academically for months? That's a harsh interpretation. You memorized my seating habits. You sighed dramatically every lecture. That's different." "How? I'm charming." Cole laughed softly. Then his expression shifted again, that softer version that kept catching me off guard tonight. "What?" I asked quietly. He hesitated for half a second before answering. His eyes stayed on mine. "I really like listening to you laugh." Every organ in my body immediately failed. Completely. "That's illegal, actually," I informed him weakly. "What is?" "Saying things like that." "Sorry." He smiled slightly. "I forgot we were emotionally avoiding things. We absolutely should still be avoiding things." "Probably." Neither of us sounded convinced. I became hyper-aware then of how close we actually were now beneath the blanket. My shoulder pressed lightly against his side. His arm warm behind me. The steady sound of his breathing in the quiet apartment. It felt intimate in a way I wasn't prepared for. Not rushed. Not overwhelming. Just real. Cole looked toward the rain-covered windows thoughtfully. "You ever think it's weird?" he asked softly. "How random life is?" "That sounds philosophical." "I'm serious." He glanced back at me. "Like, if you hadn't missed your train tonight, I probably would have spent another 6 months pretending not to look for you in class." Something tightened painfully in my chest. "Yeah," I admitted quietly. "And now you're sitting in my apartment wearing my hoodie. You say that like this was your master plan." "Honestly? I wasn't thinking past getting you out of the rain." I looked at him carefully then. Cole met my eyes immediately. And suddenly the space between us felt very small again. His voice dropped softer. "I'm glad you came with me tonight." The honesty in it hit harder than I expected. I swallowed once before answering quietly. "Yeah." A small smile appeared on his face. "Yeah?" I nodded. "Yeah," I repeated softly. "I'm glad too." And some time after that, still listening to rain against the windows, still wrapped together under one blanket on the couch, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want this to become just one stormy night, I remembered later. I wanted tomorrow too. I woke up to sunlight. For a second, I had absolutely no idea where I was. Then I felt warmth beside me. The sound of soft breathing. The weight of a blanket tangled around both of us on the couch. And immediately remembered everything. The storm. The train station. Cole. My heart did this embarrassing flip the second I turned my head slightly, and saw him asleep beside me. At some point during the night, we both drifted off without moving from the couch. Cole's arm was still loosely around me beneath the blanket, his head tilted toward mine like it had settled there naturally. Morning light spilled softly through the apartment windows now. The storm had completely passed. Everything looked calmer. Normal, almost. Which honestly made the whole thing feel even more real. Cole shifted slightly beside me, eyes opening slowly. For one terrifying half-second, I worried the daylight version of this would feel awkward somehow. Like we'd both suddenly remember we were practically strangers before last night. Instead, he looked at me sleepily and smiled immediately. "Hey!" The simple warmth in his voice relaxed something inside my chest instantly. "Hey!" I answered quietly. Cole blinked a few times like he was still waking up fully. Then his expression changed slightly as he seemed to remember the position we were in. "Oh," he said softly. "What? I thought I dreamed part of this." I laughed quietly. Which part? You wearing my hoodie on my couch looking unfairly good in morning light. That's a very specific dream. I'm a detailed person. I smiled before I could stop myself. Cole looked way too pleased about that considering he'd been awake for maybe 30 seconds. You're smiling already, he said. That sounds accusatory. It's observant. You're impossible before coffee. I'm impossible after coffee too. Fair. Neither of us moved right away. And weirdly, it didn't feel uncomfortable. If anything, morning made everything softer. Less charged maybe, but more certain somehow. Like we'd both crossed some invisible line overnight, and now quietly understood it. Cole rubbed one hand over his face tiredly before glancing toward the windows. Well, he murmured. Looks like civilization survived. Unfortunately. I was hoping classes got cancelled forever. I have tragic news about economics at 10 a.m. I groaned dramatically into the blanket. Cole laughed softly beside me. God. That sound already felt familiar somehow. Dangerously familiar. Eventually we untangled ourselves from the couch slowly, both pretending not to notice how naturally we'd fit there together. Cole stretched slightly before glancing at me again. You hungry? That depends. Are we emotionally stable enough for breakfast? Absolutely not. Good. The apartment felt different in daylight. Still warm. Still lived in. But now I noticed smaller things. Sticky notes on the fridge written in messy handwriting. A sweatshirt thrown over the kitchen chair. A cracked mug sitting beside the sink. Tiny evidence of Cole existing here every day. And somehow that affected me more than it should have. While he made coffee, I leaned against the counter watching him move around the kitchen comfortably. You know, I said carefully, you're suspiciously domestic. Cole glanced over his shoulder immediately. That sounded loaded. You made us breakfast after emotionally devastating me all night. I'm multifaceted. You're dangerous. That too. I smiled into my coffee cup. The quiet between us felt easier now. Not because the tension disappeared. Because it settled. Cole handed me toast dramatically like he was presenting luxury cuisine. Please enjoy our post-apocalyptic breakfast experience. This bread is shaped weird. It builds character. You say that about everything. Because it's true. I laughed softly again. Cole watched me for a second after that, not intensely, just thoughtfully. Then, so what happens now? The question landed gently between us. But it still made my heartbeat pick up. Because suddenly the reality of everything returned at once. This wasn't just one night anymore. Not emotionally. I looked down briefly at my coffee before answering. I think. I smiled faintly. We go to economics class pretending we didn't kiss during a flood warning. Cole groaned immediately. That sounds psychologically impossible. It does a little. He leaned back against the counter beside me. We could skip. That's irresponsible. I survived a natural disaster for you. You survived stairs. Barely. I smiled helplessly. Then quieter. You really want to see me after this? Cole looked genuinely confused by the question. Ethan. His voice softened immediately. Of course I do. The certainty in his answer hit me harder than I expected. Because there was no hesitation. No joking. Just honest. Cole studied my face for a second before smiling slightly. You're overthinking again. I don't know what you mean. You get this tiny line between your eyebrows. I stared at him. You absolutely should not know that already. And yet. I shook my head, laughing softly. Then my phone buzzed suddenly on the counter. 3 missed messages from my friend Noah. Noah. Did you survive the storm? Why aren't you answering? If you died, I'm stealing your headphones. Cole read the last message upside down and snorted. Your friend seems supportive. He's emotionally stunted. Respect. I typed back quickly. Alive. Long story? Noah replied instantly. Noah. Did you date somebody? I nearly choked on coffee. Cole raised an eyebrow immediately. Interesting reaction. Nothing. You turned red. I did not. You absolutely did. I locked my phone dramatically and pointed at him. You're invasive. You're terrible at hiding things. Stop noticing me. Cole smiled softly. Can't, he said again. And somehow hearing it in daylight felt even more dangerous than it had the night before. Because now I knew he meant it.